Alright, this video is going to be about how I feel about black men. And I'll just jump right into it without a bunch of introductions. First off, I'll say that growing up, I really didn't have any black men in my life. I didn't have my dad. I didn't have any brothers. I do have male cousins, but really I only see them around holidays or when I was a kid when I would go home for the summer. And the same thing kind of applies to my uncles. I was raised by a single mother who never had any boyfriends or never dated anybody. So basically, I didn't have any black men or black males in my life until my last year of high school and then in college. During my last year and a half of high school, I lived with my uncle who was married and had 3 sons and a daughter. One of the boys was a year older than me, and then one was like 3 years younger, and then the other one was like 5 years younger. But anyway, at the time I was living with them, they were just at this silly age where, they thought farting was funny and digging in noses, just anything gross was just hilarious. But despite all their silliness, I still enjoyed being around them and playing games with them, playing video games, making music, stuff like that. I had nice, virtually problem-free relationships with all 3 of them. My uncle, I felt that he was very loving to me, but he was hardly ever there because he's a musician, so he would travel around a lot, or he would just get home late from gigs, so I hardly ever saw him while I was living there. But anyway, and by the way, I was 17 at the time, that was the first time I'd had any black males like directly in my life, like living with them or just like in close contact with black men on a regular basis. 2 of them were boys, 1 was a teenager just older than me, and 1 was a man. Now let's jump back to my dad for a minute. I've only seen him 3 times in my whole life. And if I had to estimate, I would say I've had between 10 and 15 conversations with him on the phone in my whole life. Most of the times that we talked, I called him. And at present, I haven't talked to him in about 5 or 6 years. I don't even know. I made my mind up that if he doesn't call me, we'll never talk again, because he has just made it undeniably obvious, and that might be redundant, that he's just not interested. And I have already given him every benefit of the doubt that you can possibly give a person as to why they're not interested. Oh, maybe he feels guilty about not being there. Well, I've called him and reached my hand out to him and didn't bring up any old shit. Just kind of said, hey, let's just start from here. But he just won't keep it going. I'm always doing the calling. Also, my dad is a black Latino. He's from Panama. He grew up speaking Spanish. So I learned Spanish at least proficiently. I went to Mexico for 4 months. So I would call him up and speak to him in Spanish, and I think, well, maybe that would spark something, but no. And when I was younger, I used to think, well, maybe if I had been a boy, because he has 3 other daughters. So I was thinking, maybe if I had been a boy and maybe I could have been named after him, my dad would have taken more interest. I would have been his little carbon copy. But as I got older, I started to learn that even if I had been a boy, that wouldn't have changed anything. He's just not interested. I have a little funny story to tell you about my dad. As a kid, when I would call him up and ask him why he didn't call me, he would almost always use the excuse that he had lost my number. And this same excuse continued well into my adulthood, well after the invention of the internet. But that's not even why this excuse is ridiculous. Back in 1970 whatever, my dad walked into the place where my mom was working. She was working for some Adventist magazine. And he saw her and they had a conversation. I don't know how many times they talked or what information she gave him, but she for sure did not give him her address. Yet he somehow found her address and showed up at her door uninvited. Yes, homeboy was that bold and that resourceful. Fast forward 20 years into the future and this same guy is talking about he can't find my number. Get the fuck out of here. He was fucking Sherlock Holmes back in 1978 when he was looking for some pussy, but in 2010 he can't find his daughter? But anyway, let's just not get me started. But anyway, let's get back to my point. Growing up, there were never any black males in my life that were really close to me. No fathers, no stepdads, no brothers, no friends. I mean, the cousins and the uncle that I live with, I love them, but it's just not the same as having a father or a brother. And with my cousins, I didn't have the type of relationship where I could confide something in them. Any kind of deep conversation would just been met with sniggles and farts. I think that maybe if somebody had been messing with me at school, I could have told my older cousin that he would have handled that, but he wouldn't be the type to say, oh, you look nice today, or you did a good job on this. He would say things like that to his little sister, because she was a really little kid. She was the youngest of all of us. She was probably 5 or 6. But anyway, back to my point. I'm not going to automatically have a special place in my heart for you just because you're a black man. You have to be nice to me. You have to be respectful. At this point in time, my own dad doesn't mean anything to me. And not because I hate dads. It's because he's not a good dad. He doesn't care about me. I don't really believe in unconditional love. My love is conditional. And I'm not a Christian, so I don't believe in love your enemies and turning the other cheek and all that bullshit. If you can't be nice to me, fuck you. And some people try to tell me, oh, well, he's your father, so you shouldn't have that attitude. Your arms should always be open. And I'm like, why? Just because he skeeted me out? Well, evidently that doesn't mean anything to him, so it doesn't mean anything to me. And that's the same way I feel about black men in general. If you're not nice to me, there's no special place in my heart for you. I'm not going to embrace you just because you're black. I'm done embracing people just because they're my family, or just because they're black, or just because they're female. Now, I have a lot of black male listeners who say they love my videos, and some of them even message me on Yahoo, and we'll have nice, civil, long conversations, and even if they don't want to agree or if they want to confront me on something, I mean, as long as you're respectful, you can talk to me or, question me about anything. There was one guy who left comments on my channel, and he was concerned about why I had pictures of black guys on my background. Now, there had been a lot of other dumbasses making comments about that, and I just ignored them. But since he asked me respectfully, I wrote him a nice email and explained myself totally. I think that if someone respectfully asks me a question, in most cases I feel that they deserve a response. So really, if there's something I'm doing or something I said in a video that bothers you, just ask me about it. Now, I'm making this video partially in response to ramblings that I don't like black men or I bash black men, which I usually don't even entertain because I've said time and time again, if you think I've bashed black men, tell me specifically what I said that makes you feel that way. And I never get any answers. But yet they still want to keep saying that. I have never said that another race of man is better than black men. I rarely, if ever, make comparisons between black men and non-black men. And if I do, I try to do a fair comparison. Like, I'm not going to say, well, white men have accomplished this, this, and that, and black men have accomplished it. That's not fair. I've never promoted interracial dating for black women. All three of the things I just mentioned are things that Sergeant Willie Pete has done with black women. He said other women were better, he's made unfair comparisons, and he promotes interracial dating. But some black men will sit up under him and absorb all the garbage that he says. I'm not saying everything he says is garbage, but some of it is. But then want to say that I hate black men or I bash black men? I will say this, however. I don't ever see myself getting on the mic and saying something like, oh, I love black men. I can't say that because it would be a lie. Because my dad's a black man and I'm not loving him right now. But I do have love and respect for the black men who have love and respect for me. But that doesn't even need to be said because that's basically how I treat everyone. I don't assume that you're my brother just because you're black, and I don't assume that you're my enemy just because you're not black. Everyone gets evaluated on an individual basis. Now I think that all, if not most, of the black men who are constantly claiming that I always bash black men, I think most of them are the interracial lovers. And I think that perhaps that some of the videos I've made about that subject have offended them. I also understand that many of these black men probably have had repeated negative experiences with black women. They're used to getting attitude from them or cussed out by them, or black women always having something negative to say about black men. And it's gotten to the point to where if a black woman says anything that's not exactly what they want to hear, they want to put it in the category of bashing, or they want to call the woman belligerent or a black man hater. But unlike Sergeant Willie Pete, I'm not someone who only wants to tell it like it is when it comes to one side. I tell the truth as I see it to black women too, and they don't always like what I have to say. Also, if you go back and listen to any of my videos that I made about black men and interracial, pretty much all of them except for maybe one or two were responses to somebody. The racial hierarchy video was a response to Pink Elephant. The Something Your White Woman Can't Do video was a response to, Kid Brother. The Classy My Assy video series was a response to Sergeant Willie Pete, and so was the last one I did. What was it? The one about comparing black woman, white man relationships to black man, white woman relationships. That was a response to Sergeant Willie Pete, who had brought my name up in the video on that subject. Now, I had been talking to him about this behind the scenes, and just like some of our other conversations, he decided to take it public, so I responded publicly. But I don't just sit around making random videos about black guys. Almost all of them are video responses. And then some people want to say, well, why don't you ignore them? No, why don't you ignore the video if you don't like it? I always warn you at the beginning, this is going to be a response to so-and-so and so-and-so. If you don't like that, don't watch. You can't say I rickrolled you into watching because I announced it loud and clear at the beginning of the video what it was going to be about. And for the record, there are a lot of things that Sergeant Willie Pete says, or Calvary is Here says, or Kid Brother says that I do just let slide. Next point, some people want to trip on the fact that I'm married to an Asian guy. And they're asking me things like, why are you talking about black relationships when you're not in one? And I can't believe how many people think that's a good question. There are a few things that, when it comes to a relationship, it is unique to the race or culture of the two people in the relationship. But I don't really even talk about that stuff. Not usually. Treating your man well, letting him lead, that is not a black thing, that's not a white thing, that's not an Asian thing. How to choose good men and avoid the bad ones, again, not a white thing, not a black thing. If I'm telling women, if your guy comes through the door and it looks like he's had a hard day at work, take his jacket, take his briefcase or whatever he comes in the door with, sit him down, get him a glass of his favorite drink and rub his feet. What race of man doesn't like that? How is that a fucking racial issue? The color of my guy has fuck all to do with what I talk about on this channel. But if you think your black relationship is so alien and so different from everybody else's, so much so that you can't take advice or listen to the videos of a black woman who's married to an Asian guy, then why are you on my channel? Nobody is forcing you to be here. But I'm not going to stop talking about black relationships. The reason I talk about black relationships is because I want to help black women with their relationship issues, and most black women overwhelmingly prefer black men, so those are the men who are probably going to get brought up the most. I don't promote interracial dating. I don't even really bring up the fact that my dude is Asian. You guys keep bringing it up. And you know what? I've been married to him for almost a year now. But you guys have only been knowing about this for like the last 2 or 3 months because I went on a stylistic show and he asked me a direct question. But other than that, you wouldn't even know because I don't need to broadcast the fact that I'm married to a non-black. I do, however, need to advertise the fact that he is an engineer. But anyway, I only mention him when he's relevant and I only mention his race when it's relevant. I remember I made a networking video a few months back, and actually the guy who I walked into the subway with and took the other guy's number behind the counter, that was actually my husband, but I didn't mention that at the time because it just really wasn't relevant to the story. I don't flaunt him. I didn't even volunteer the information about him. I was asked. Unlike other black people here on YouTube and other places online who can't wait to tell everybody that their mate is non-black. And then there are other people who say, well, I don't think you're married at all. Yeah, I don't care. Moving along, there's a couple of things I want to say just because I think it would be interesting to hear how people react to them. My dear old daddy is in fact married to a white woman, and he has been for the last 40 some odd years. And just in case you're wondering, no, I am not over 40. Nowhere near. And no, I am not biracial. My father's wife is not my mother. I have 3 biracial half-sisters that I've never met. 2 are older and 1 is younger. Again, you do the math. And I'll close this video with another open invitation to anyone who feels that I bash black men. Just tell me how and we'll talk about it. But you don't need to come on my channel and call me belligerent when I'm not. I mean, love me or hate me, but you can't say I'm belligerent. That comment was left by a guy who needed to paint me in some kind of negative light to justify why he didn't want a black woman. He needs all black women to have something wrong with them. But anyway, I done harped on that enough. Oh, one more thing. Looks like this is going to be my 100th video, so happy birthday to me. Or whatever.